The verse of the day is Psalm 22:16, where many English translations say follows: "Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me, they pierce my hands and my feet." The word for pierce, or dug, is ka'aru. This word appears in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it also appears in other places. But the Dead Sea Scrolls are older than the time when Jesus walked the earth. They're considered over 100 years at least older than when Jesus walked the earth. And so that particular word appears. The last letter is a word that's consistent with that. Now, in some translations that came about later, especially around the Masoretic time, which were between 6 and 10 centuries after Christ walked the earth, a lot of those translations come as "like a lion, my hands, my feet." And so Dr. Michael Brown takes a look at this issue, and he is debating Rabbi Singer, and I think he does a really rock star job of answering this question, because a lot of people are trying to make an illusion that the word that is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which contained an extra letter, an aleph, they're trying to say that because that aleph was there in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that the word itself is meaningless. And so let's hear what he has to say.
This is Sheker V'chazav is a lie. Kaf Aleph Resh Vav. What does that word mean? Anybody? What is the word in Hebrew where I'm standing here in the land of Israel, filled with Hebrew speakers? You all don't tell me none of you speak Hebrew. Kaf Aleph Resh Vav. What does this word mean? It means nothing. There is no such word. I'm not going to get into it. You can't have a verb with the aleph in it as a root. I don't want to get complicated. There is no such word. You have been lied to.
Oh, that really makes me squirm. Whoa, unreal. Oh, okay, so let's first start. He's going to ask a Hebrew-speaking audience what karu means, and they say nothing. There's no such word. Okay. First problem is there are many words from biblical Hebrew and biblical vocabulary that are not used in Hebrew today. In fact, I embarrassed myself talking to Israelis in the 70s when I was studying Hebrew, because my biblical Hebrew was much better than my modern, and I'd say things in biblical Hebrew and they'd shake their heads. No, this is the way you say it now. We don't use those terms. Not that they were bad terms, but just they're not used anymore. Expressions, grammatical things. So he's going to prove a point about a biblical Hebrew word from 3,000 years ago and say, well, is it spoken today? If not, it's gibberish. I guess, though, what gets the biggest reaction from me is when he says you can't have an aleph as a root. You can't have an aleph as a root letter in a Hebrew verb. So in other words, this has a middle aleph, kaf, aleph, resh, right? You can't have an aleph in a verbal root. What? I mean, how many verbs do you have? I mean, just go. How do you say to elucidate? It's beit aleph resh, that verb. All right. To worry, dalet aleph gimel. To redeem, gimel aleph lamed. I mean, word after word after word. To weary, lamed aleph hey. Slowness is connected with lamed aleph tet. I mean, on and on. Example after example after example after example. Just take just biblical Hebrew lexicon, or even a modern Hebrew lexicon if you want to. You'll see the same phenomena there. You just go through it and look for each verb, verbal roots, and then just scroll down to where aleph would be the second one. You have example after example after example. Words that he knows perfectly well. So what was that? Was that just a total brain freeze?
I think we could answer that quite squarely. And so one of the other arguments that can be made on this type of issue relates to the Septuagint. So the Septuagint was authored starting around 250 years before Christ. And the authors of the Septuagint drew from the ancient Hebrew, to also translate that particular verse from Hebrew into Greek, because Greek was the language spoken, the common language spoken at the time. So these people had been commissioned, there were 70 of them, they were commissioned to translate the ancient Hebrew into Greek. And when they saw the Dead Sea Scrolls, or they saw what the scrolls were at that time, the ancient scrolls, the authors translated the word into a Greek word that meant to dig, or to pierce, very similarly. And so many of the translations that we have today also do that. Now, people will say again that that word is meaningless and that the authors made an error. And we will continue with one more example of the latter. So here I had Kipp Davis, who is a scholar who studied the Dead Sea Scrolls. Here's how he translates the particular word that can either be pierced and dug as one word, or another word, that's ka'ru, or ka'ari, which is referencing to like a lion.
Well, I'll start with mine. This is an exercise in Occam's razor. And as Dr. Josh pointed out, scribal error is a real thing, and it happened all the time in antiquity. And with this particular error, this vav-yod transference, the confusion of these two letters, which were notoriously similar in many texts from antiquity, it happens probably more than any other type of scribal error in Hebrew. So the situation is like this: the original word read ka'ari, employing the word lion, ari. It was mistranscribed by a careless scribe to look like this, where the yod was replaced with a vav. The Septuagint, the Greek translator, encountered a manuscript like this and didn't know what to do with it. And so, oh, I misspelled these. How embarrassing of me. Anyways, the Septuagint translator came along and did his best to try and figure out what he thought the text said based on how it appeared before him, and came up with this translation, horaxan cheras mu ki podas, which literally means they dug my hands and feet. And overzealous Christian interpreters after in the centuries following the establishment of the church came to understand this as a fulfillment of prophecy. And to my mind, that makes eminently more sense than as originally a description of a crucifixion at some time prior to the Babylonian exile. If this was actually a psalm that was written prior to the Babylonian exile, I'm not even sure.
So let me get a clarification of what you're saying, so make sure I understand what you're saying here. So you're saying in ancient times, you knew that it should be like a lion, but some Hebrew made it so it ends instead in the other letter. And how do you know that in ancient times the original should have been like a lion instead of being something translated as dug?
Well, because the scribal error, as it appears in
how do you know
this,
though?
Well, I mean, how do we know anything? I'm saying,
no, how do you know? But you're saying in ancient times there was a scribal error, and I'm trying to get out of you to tell me, how do you know that it was originally one letter and not the other? How do you know?
Let me finish my sentence this time. First, Josh, can I finish my sentence this time?
Please, yeah.
It's because the word as it appears in the Nachal Hever Psalm, Kaf, Aleph, Resh, Vav, doesn't mean anything.
So he's making the same point as Tovia Singer. So it's interesting. He's employing Jewish apologetics to make a point against Christianity and to make a point against Christians. But I can say, even if it's like a lion, my hands and feet, lions don't just lick your hands and feet, as Dr. Michael Brown has said. Lions don't do that kind of thing. They would tear at you. Or we could expand the entire verse and look at the entire Psalm 22 and all of the other things that were occurring to the person who was referenced. And the things had very much consistency with the crucifixion. And of course, Jesus was crucified, and on the third day, he rose again in fulfillment of the scriptures. Okay, in fulfillment of the scriptures. Go back, take a look at Isaiah 53 and Zechariah 12:10 for other references to the way the Messiah was going to be pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. But he will see the light of life. He saw the light, okay? Isaiah 53:11, he saw the light and resurrected. And that forms the foundation of Christianity. Thank you so much for coming in. Please like, subscribe, and do come again.